Welcome, everybody. I'm Jill Nash, and I'm the founder of Women Forward. I'm joining you today from Lausanne, Switzerland, where it's midnight local time. So I'm going to try to still be coherent here. Um, I wouldn't have missed today's session for anything. I think you're in for a real treat, and we're so glad that you joined us. Now, we noticed that there's a lot of new people who RSVP'd for this session. So I'm going to give a quick background because we think it's interesting of this group and how we came together. In 2020, lots of different women were involved with lots of different campaigns, and we all came together to support Joe Biden. And we started out with just really two or three women. And by the time the campaign or the campaign wrapped up in November, we had grown to 750,000 women. And we organized across social media platforms horizontally. And then vertically, we organized by state within Facebook. And at that time, we had about 35 states that were organized. Now, we all thought that we were going to go back to our lives and do what we had been doing previously. And then January 6th happened. And we knew we had to stay involved. And so we stayed in the fight, first as Women for Biden, then as Women for Harris, and now Women Forward. We know that the midterms are going to be critical. And we know that we have to organize even now. Today, we're 1.4 million women, and we know we have to continue to grow. We need every woman in every corner of this country in the fight. And that's why we were so excited to hear from our guest speakers today. But I would be remiss if I didn't first thank Linda Douglas, who has been with us from the beginning. Linda is a former White House senior correspondent. She's a corporate communications professional. She worked in the Obama White House, and we are so lucky to have her kind of in our corner interviewing all of our guests. So with that, Linda, let me turn it over to you.
Well, thank you so much, Jill, and your dedication is perfect at all times. And the fact that you are coming to us from a time zone where it's tomorrow means that if you want to go off camera, that's totally fine. You can get into your jammy.
Thank you.
Yeah. Get your hot toddy.
Thank you.
So in the meantime, hello to everyone, and we are really excited about this conversation with two of the leading members of the Women's Democratic Caucus, the Democratic Women's Caucus, which really is, a very, very influential force in the House of Representatives. So first, I want to introduce Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. She is from New Mexico, and she is, from what I can tell, a real fighter. She's got kind of an inspiring backstory. She went to the very first Head Start program in New Mexico, as I read, and then became a lawyer from from Stanford educated lawyer, public interest lawyer, where she fought for schools and for public health, broadband, businesses, and she is a true, both of our members here she's a true fighter for women. And we're definitely discussing women and families today and how they are affected, not just by Trump, but by the Congress, by the Republicans in Congress. And then we have Congresswoman Jill Tokuda, who is from one of my all-time favorite states in the world, Hawaii. And she also has an inspiring backstory, the very first person in her family to go to college, and she went to one of the top schools here in Washington, D.C., the George Washington University. She was in the state legislature, where she really worked on all the important priority issues with great success, I would say. So she passed laws that provided access to public health for schools, and also a very, very important set of protections for the often very endangered lands of Hawaii. And in Congress, she has immersed herself in something that's hard for a lot of us to understand, which is cybersecurity. And she is also a champion for women. So we are going to talk about women and I'm going to call it the Republican bill, the Republican billionaires bill. How about that, rather than the big, beautiful bill? And we are going to talk about that. Pardon me for the Kleenex. I've got a cold, so I'll be doing that once in a while. But first, I want to ask you, because you've been involved really with women in the Democratic women since you got to Congress. What is it like now? Like, how does it feel now in today's climate with so much aimed at women to be in your caucus? Is it depressing? Is it scary? Is it infuriating? Do you feel helpless? Like, do you feel, empowered? Like, tell us what that is like in the dynamic inside your caucus.
I'll take it and then toss it over to Jill. Thank you so much, Linda. I am chair of the Democratic Women's Caucus. We are 96 women strong, the largest ever group of women serving as Democratic Congresswomen. And I need to tell you, this caucus, it is never, ever, to my knowledge, ever been sad, or we have never practiced despair. We have always practiced joy. We are fierce, we are battle tested, but the other thing is we represent the women of America. You know, our members come from every aspect of what you could imagine, right? We are women who've suffered miscarriage. We're women who have used IVF, who've had abortions, who've almost died. I almost died when I was pregnant once, right? So we know what it's like to go through these things. We are children of women who have been drug addicts. We've suffered poverty. We've, overcome lots of obstacles. We are America's women. And so we know how to fight for America's women. And we bring with it this energy that is just marvelous. And it's what inspired me to run for chair. Was I saw it as being more like a orchestra leader, right? So because everybody has an expertise. Jill is an expert, and not only in cybersecurity, but she heads up, and I sit with her on our Rural Healthcare Task Force. And we just lead on so many different issues. And we know that in this moment we are living through, it is our job to represent not just the women of our own districts, but the women in every corner of America, and perhaps even more so, the women in Republican districts, because they are not having their voices heard. So we are what I would call joyful warriors. I'm so glad that, Kamala used that phrase, because indeed that's who we are. Jill, what do you think the atmosphere is in the Democratic Women's Caucus?
Well, we're definitely not holding back. And we're not taking this lying down. I love the theme of tonight's conversation, cutting through the noise. But if I may, this is really about cutting through the bullshit, right? That is exactly what we are doing as women, 100%. Teresa mentioned that we are American women. We are America. What she was describing, we are America, plain and simple. And, I think back to when I suddenly lost my mother. And it dawned on me in that moment in time that it wasn't just about me anymore. It was about taking care of my brothers and my grandparents. It was trying to do so much more. And it wasn't just about worrying about myself, my goals, my dreams, my interests. That's who we are at the end of the day. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're aunties. We understand that this is so much bigger than just ourselves. And we're out there fighting, as Teresa said. We're fighting for everyone, for our constituents, but everyone's constituents, for our children, but everyone's children. I'm a mom of 2 teenage boys, which I consider to be a harder responsibility sometimes than being a member of Congress. But I can tell you that perspective of looking at everything that I do, every decision I make, every vote I take through the lens of my kids and everyone's kids. Will they be okay when it comes to getting a job? Can they afford college, which I'll be staring down the barrel of that discussion very, very soon with my own kids. And the fact that over 4 million people lost Pell Grants just the other week with that big, ugly bill. Can they take care of themselves in the most rural parts of our country? One of the main reasons I've co-founded and co-lead the Bipartisan Rural Health Caucus in Congress is because my constituents would ask me, why do I live 10 years less than the big city down the street? And I couldn't give them an answer. Why they were burying their brothers and sisters earlier and younger. than people who had access to healthcare and doctors and providers and could afford it, but also lived in different conditions that allowed them to have a better quality of life. And that was to me unacceptable. And Teresa's an active member of our bipartisan rural caucus because we recognize the fact, again, as mothers and sisters, as women, it's more than just about us. It's about taking care of our communities.
So this brings, this is just a quick question, but I've been so curious about this. I was a journalist, a reporter who covered Congress for 10 years. And back when I did it, back in the, in the early, all the way through the 90s, the early 2000s, the women, there were not as many women, but the Republican and Democratic women were much better friends, I think, than you are now. So everything you're talking about, I mean, this is a question I think that we're all interested in. You're talking like the rest of us feel and live our lives. How do you get along with the Republican women who are presumably supporting policies that aren't good for women?
So
We'll take that one out.
I play on the women's softball team,
Oh, yeah.
which is bipartisan and bicameral. I am a breast cancer survivor, so I felt I had to, join the women's softball game, even though I had Title IX didn't make it to my small rural village in northern New Mexico, so I had never held a ball before or kicked a ball or done anything without a ball. But it was like, I'm a breast cancer survivor, I'm showing up. And it is really wonderful because we do get to know each other outside of the environment of Congress. I will say, and we're working on, for example, there are a lot of bipartisan caucuses that work on things together. I have a bipartisan Head Start to Congress caucus. We are working together on the Women's Museum, very, very close relationship on the Women's Museum, where we're also trying to work together on the Latino Museum so that neither one of them get left behind. So there are areas where we will find the common ground to work on together. But it is incredibly disappointing when not a single Republican woman voted for the Paycheck Fairness Act. Not a single Republican woman voted to make sure that we had equal pay for equal work. Not a single Republican woman. And over in so many of the really intense policy issues, they do not seem to support issues that affect women. I mean, the Democratic Women's Caucus called it the bad billionaires bill. Then I had been meeting with Heather Cox Richardson. I told her, and so she used that as the bad billionaires bill. It is there are so many bad ways of describing that bill. There's a great meme out there about all the alliteration you could do, like the boondoggle, it is bad, right? And so that bill takes particular aim at women and children and families. The Republicans, the Doge, have taken particular aim at women. And right now, women cannot afford Trump. We cannot afford Republican policies. Females are on the list of discouraged words, which is why grants and funding targeted at women are being cut and frozen. DEI, we're the ones they don't want participating. I'm Latina, so, and Jill, we get the double hit. They don't want either my Latina side or my woman side having equal access. So those are really hard, but we do find places where we can work together. And I also think we only need 3, maybe 4 Republican votes to kill certain aspects. So I do think we are all trying to find some of those Republican votes that are not the Freedom Caucus votes, but that are the ones who say they won't support Medicaid cuts, but voted for it anyway. So we are looking to lessen the negative impact with some bipartisanship behind the scenes.
So, did you want to jump in there, Jill, or I'm going to dive right into this? I actually love what you said, the big ugly bill.
Yeah, I've been calling it Bub for a while, but I just want to add a little thing. It is difficult, but I will tell you, I think even more so now, and I think women have the ability to do it more than men do. We have to lean in and be intentional. in terms of trying to keep even a crack, sliver, something of a door open to being able to have communication with the other side, to pray that there's a conscience and a heart and some concern, some common sense that's going to come over from the Republicans. And, even with my bipartisan rural health caucus, I have a bipartisan coffee caucus. I go on bipartisan events, with the congressional study group for Japan and Korea. I intentionally try to seek out these conversation and relationships with everyone from Freedom Caucus members all the way to those that lean a little bit slightly to the middle. And it is really tough right now. I will tell you, it's very, very tough because it's like we're talking about two distinct different realities. But I do believe if we are in this for the long haul, as I learned from a lot of the folks who represented Hawaii for decades, we've got to keep that door open. And you can't see behind me, but I've got small bottles of moonshine behind me that I trade with a female member of the Republican Party with chocolate macadamia nuts and coffee sometimes. And it's the little things. We're not going to go deep into a debate on abortion, trans care, gender affirming care, all that. But you know what? We have to keep talking. And I think that is something, as Teresa said, whether we're playing, softball together, whether we're having conversations that can be about family and whatnot, we have to keep those doors open intentionally because we have to make sure there is a path for them to walk on that is towards that middle and towards what we know is to be the right thing for women and families.
So I do have some political questions for you, but I actually want to stick with the bad billionaires bill. Because there are, so what I think what women voters know now is that we guessed wrongly that stripping away reproductive rights was going to help the Democrats win the 2024 election. We didn't win, as angry as women were, and watching what was happening and is continuing to happen in the states is still completely stunning. But there are, and I'm going to ask you about DEI, but I first want to ask you, what is in this bill that is really going to be harmful for women and their families that most women don't even know about? I mean, because you're saying a lot of this bill is going to wind up on the backs of women, which so many any cuts in the safety net wind up on the backs of women. But talk specifically about what it is that women should be aware of that the Republican Party on their own is doing with this bill. And Congresswoman Fernandez, I'll start with you.
Okay, so the big one that we talk a lot about is Medicaid. A high proportion of Medicaid serves women because of two things. One is pregnancy. 40% of births in the United States are paid for by Medicaid. If you're in a rural area, it could be 60% or up to 70%. Another area that, so in order to have healthy babies, you need to be able to get that care. And then you need to be able to get Medicaid afterwards. And they are cutting that. So when they impact Medicaid, they are going to be impacting women who are giving birth. And then at the end, so at the beginning of life, when it's most precious, when we care so much, and then at the end of life, when we should also care so very much, women make up a higher proportion of people in nursing homes. Medicaid can provide up to 75% of the patient of the patients in nursing homes are women using Medicaid. So in those two areas, when you undermine Medicaid, you are undermining services that women depend on and rely on. The SNAP program, many of the—
And that's food stamps, just for our audience.
Yeah, so Medicaid, so the nutrition programs where we have often single mothers, not always, but single mothers are often utilizing the nutrition programs to make sure their kids are not hungry. And we can go into that, and I'll let Jill talk maybe a little bit more about some of those things. But one of the things that they threw in at the very last moment, we are there. We finally, as some of you know, we had a full day of work on a Tuesday, and then we went into committee on 1 o'clock in the morning. I sit on the Rules Committee, so I started at 1 a.m. and people like Jill Tokuda came and presented amendments and did an amazing job. But when we finally we worked through the night, all the next day and into the next night, they handed us the rule with a manager's amendment. And in that manager's amendment, they had made additional changes, which were going to throw another 400,000 people off of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
And they made a change so that it will discourage Affordable Care Act policy. So private insurance that you might buy if you're on the exchange will no longer carry or serve abortion care, reproductive health care.
Yeah.
Now that is like they are getting closer and closer to a national abortion ban with that. We saw it, like even though it was in the wee hours of the morning, we were flipping through these additional 40 pages and said, what's this? And we called it out because we do think that the issue of women's reproductive health care is something we still need to run on and we still can win on. And we're not going to give up on that. But that's in that bill too. They are attacking reproductive health with your private insurance.
Which is crazy. I mean, you know, what I actually worked on the Affordable Care Act myself as a spokesperson, and one of the things that the market that existed before that law was passed basically had concluded that being a woman was a pre-existing condition. Like your medical care was more expensive just because you were a woman. And so you know, we really appreciate the fact that you're staying vigilant on what's happening to healthcare for women. Congresswoman Tokuda, did you have anything that you were seeing in the bill on top of what Congresswoman Fernandez already said that was just that you want the women in your state and in the country to know about?
Mhm. I think women have to understand it's going to hit absolutely every one of us. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Let's think about the fact that oftentimes we're that sandwich generation and we're the ones within the family that's taking care of both younger children as well as our aging parents. Now you're going to cut Medicaid by close to $1 trillion. CBO is estimating at least 14 million people potentially axing getting rid of their health care. You're going to cut Medicare by $500 billion, $500 billion, right? These seniors that oftentimes are being taken care of by even aging children, often the women in the family that's being asked to leave the workforce and take care of mom and dad. In many cases, less money for long-term care, for respite care, for all of the things that they absolutely need. At the same time, they said, oh, well, good for us. We only cut 20% of the staff for Head Start, and we're not going to cut your funding. We're going to keep it baseline, but it hasn't gone up for the last 3 years, which means at the end of the day, we are providing less for Head Start and childcare and preschool opportunities than we absolutely should be. So you are still, again, hurting the sandwich generation, hurting the women of this generation that are taking care of both ends of the spectrum right now. Women have to understand, if for whatever reason you don't think reproductive care is important to you, then how about look at your baby in their eye, your children, your parents, and tell them, I'm sorry, you can't get the care that you need. You can't get cancer care. You can't get life-saving, life-lengthening care. And by the way, sweetheart, no second serving of food, because I don't have SNAP right now. I make too much money, even though it will not pay the grocery bills this month. I took to the floor when Teresa had the special order hours and testified before the committee. I had stories from across my community that broke your heart about women who sold their wedding bands to pay for gas and food.
Wow.
Mothers who said it broke their heart. They could not give their child a second helping of food because she had to portion out how much each child got fed. And at the end of the day, she didn't eat so that they could. This is the real world that we are talking about. And every woman out there has to understand it is going to be close to home. You will know someone or you will feel it yourself. And that's why we've all got to stand up and fight together.
And Planned Parenthood was specifically, we're getting rid of, they're defunding Planned Parenthood. And as Jill pointed out, I wanted to make sure everybody knew exactly that, because Planned Parenthood does provide abortion care. None of it paid for with any federal benefits, but it is often the sole provider in many areas of women's health care, you know, cancer screenings, all those basic things. And then there is another piece that people might not pay attention to as much. But I am the Democrat who represents the largest rural district held by a Democrat. So a lot of my district works very Republican, but I do really well in it. And we can talk a little later about how you overperform in rural Republican areas. But they're going to kill rural healthcare. Because when you take away Medicaid, and I went to go visit one of my rural hospitals a few days ago, and they pointed out that some of their clinics are 45% Medicaid provided. So when you take out that rural hospital or that rural clinic, because you've cut Medicaid and Medicare, that hospital or that rural clinic goes under. So it hurts everybody in the community, not just those who are receiving their care through Medicaid or Medicare.
Yeah, so it's really important for us, as you know, as we consider what we should be activating ourselves on, to remember that as bad as everything that the president is doing right now to destroy democracy and take over the power of Congress and put it in his own hands, that what is equally threatening to all of us is what's happening with this bill. And he's not calling the shots on the bill. They're doing that, you know. I mean, he's making crazy cuts with Elon Musk and things that are, you know, arguably illegal. But in terms of cutting Medicaid and cutting healthcare and you know, making changes that were going to, you know, endanger women who are going to have a baby, or women raising children, those are decisions being made by the Republican Party in order to pay for those tax cuts. And so, you know, I think this message is what you're saying here is really, really critical to get out to our audience.
And Linda, I think that's that's really key, because we need to remember the presidential. I mean, it feels like a lifetime, just like feels like we're in purgatory and it's you know, in hell. But you know, the next election is 2026.
Right.
And we need 4 Republicans to say no in the Senate and in the House. And this is where, if we activate women across the country, in every state, in every district, this is where we can get some traction and have them push back. Because their proposals were even worse when they started out several months ago. And because we have been sounding the alarm and the American public does not like what they are doing, they've started trying to cut it back, and they took out some of the worst provisions. Can you imagine it was even worse than this? And now they're trying to hang it all on, oh, we're just making people work. Well, that's not really what's happening here. And the way they're going to be pushing a lot of stuff to the states can't afford. They say, oh, they're going to make the states kick everybody off. But it's really because they told the states, we're not giving you the money anymore, right?
Yeah.
So they are really kicking them off. But that's where women across this country can be activated in those places where there are vulnerable Republicans, and where there are re-elections, or where people have said they don't really like what's happening. Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, stick to your guns, stay with us, right? In the Senate, but there's a couple of other places in the Senate. What Joni Ernst did, right? Oh my God, let's make sure we call her out. If you are on the line from Iowa, call her out, right? Because when we call people out, it's working. They stopped holding town halls because we have been raising the alarm. So we are going into the town halls. I've been in California red districts. I just got back from Utah. Let's not give up on places like Utah. Let's not give up on any of the, let's go into all Republican areas, because the message we have is one about caring and loving. We have a message and a vision for America, and they have one of destruction.
Well, I mean, at the heart of the democracy argument is the fact that you elect your representative in Congress to represent you. You know, they don't work for the president, they work for you, the voters. And so, you know, I think that is a really very important message to be passing along, that we want to remind, you know, every voter in a district with a vulnerable Republican that that member is sitting there silently and not working on your behalf.
Linda, I would argue they're not sitting there silently. Your no vote, when they vote yes on the big ugly bill, when they vote against amendments to protect women and, you know, our families and our children, our reproductive health and rights and access to care and all of these things, SNAP benefits, that's not silent. You're taking a sledgehammer to women's ability to care for themselves and their families, to live a life, to live for everyone. And so I think we have to almost make sure people have scorecards across these vulnerable districts to be able to say, just what did you do for me? Did you
Yeah,
pick me or did you pick Trump? You
Yeah.
voted for the big ugly bill. You voted with Trump, right? You didn't stop Doge. You voted with Trump.
Right.
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 You allowed these executive orders to basically take over the rights of Congress, the power of our purse, the ability to impact trade and tariffs. Nope, you were with Trump. We need a
Right.
scorecard that shows every single time Republicans intentionally chose to disrespect and ignore their constituents. That's one of the reasons Democrats are putting up these amendments. Now, we know, first of all, they're too scared to listen to us. When
Right.
Teresa was asking tough questions, there was not a Republican to be found. When I was in the Ag Committee, they stopped the debate halfway, but the Republicans were nowhere to be found. They could not listen to the truth. It was really hard for them. But it was so important for us to propose the amendments because we want to hold them accountable. We want them to actually vote against their constituents. When they vote and say rural health isn't important, don't worry, it's not going to be impacted, and it does happen, that's when they voted with Trump. So I think it's so critical we continue to, again, hold them accountable and let them know this is not silently getting away with things. You are hurting. You are directly impacting every single constituency that you claim to be representing here in Congress.
So, the other thing that's happening to women that you're watching is the assault, and this is from the executive branch, from Trump and Doge and Pete Hegseth and you name it, on diversity, equity, and inclusion, which we refer to in shorthand as DEI. I hope America knows what that is. We tend to, in Washington, use terms that nobody can follow, but it is policies that nudge the government or a university or a private business to not just automatically go for the white male. And women are being affected by the rollback, which is very aggressive, the rollback of DEI, where you are literally taking away Harvard's money because they, have concerns about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I mean, you are literally, taking women's jobs away or moving women out of jobs in the military just because they're women. How have you in the Democratic Women's Caucus been handling that issue? And what does it feel like to sit there with all the progress women thought that they had made and watch this happening? And I'll start with you. I'll start with you, Congresswoman Tokuda. I'll start with you.
Thank you. First of all, especially coming from Hawaii, a lot of times I, from the very beginning, I had folks coming to my office saying, we're trying to scrub our websites for anything that might be a red flag, a bad word. We're looking at, making sure it doesn't have any DEI on it. And it was really heartbreaking for me. And I said, well, then what's left? What's left on that website? What's left in that grant report that you're submitting? DEI is all of us. It's not a bad word. In fact, last I checked, diversity, equity, inclusion was what the forefathers of this country actually were trying to get us to, that better place, that, it's not some bad word. And sadly, as Democrats, we've allowed them to control the message and the narrative on DEI, on so many different, on progressive, on women's rights, all these things. We've allowed them to on trans, we've allowed them to somehow make this divisive within the greater community. We have to actually wrap our arms around it and own it and let people know it doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter about your gender identity or your sexual orientation. This is about the country we want to become and the values that we believe in. That's what we are talking about at the end of the day when we talk about DEI. To be able to dismiss it and go up beyond and above that from what we are seeing people push back on DEI, that's from a very privileged place, if you ask me. And as a woman of color, I can tell you that it's absolutely disgusting to have to defend my right to be different.
Yeah.
And defend the right that life isn't the same for me as it is for a straight white man. And
Well,
America isn't just straight white men.
Yeah, well, both of you are women of color, and so that is a double whammy. So Congresswoman Fernandez, how do you fight back on this issue, which, you know, the public is, I mean, there's the white public and then there's the public, which is certainly not, you know, all white. But how do you fight back on something that seems so incredibly grossly regressive and wrong?
So you've got two women of color, as you pointed, and we've got two women of color who come from states who recognize that diversity is indeed a strength. Like in New Mexico, you pledge, you know, allegiance to the flag, and then you reach out and point to the flag of New Mexico and celebrate the Zia symbol, which is a symbol of harmony among diverse cultures. Like it is in our DNA, it is in our flag, the idea that diversity is something to be celebrated, right? Because it is where you get strength. It is what makes life interesting. Imagine if you had boiled potatoes every single day. No, right? You want to have interest in your life. You don't want to be able to get the value and the contributions of all of the different diverse cultures that make up the United States, and the fact that women make up more than half of the United States. So when you are firing admirals at the Coast Guard and commissioners at the Equal Opportunity Commission, when you're gutting the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor, you are actually attacking half of the population, and you are dismissing all of our hard work as somehow woke. And what the heck does that mean, right? And so I think that Jill is right, that we reclaim and say what we are talking about is equity, is fairness. Why would you be against something that is about fairness and justice and that which is just? And that we need to reclaim who America is. When we were talking about the fact that there are 96 women now in the Democratic Women's Caucus, and we are working so that we will be over 100, and women will help flip the House. We are taking back the House big time in when it's coming up. When John Adams, and when you said something earlier, it reminded me of when John Adams was talking about the House of Representatives, he wanted it to be a miniature of America, a
Right.
exact portrait, right? Now, when he was talking about that, neither Jill nor I were in that portrait, right?
Right.
Because we were women, maybe because we didn't own land. You didn't get to be in that portrait if you also didn't own land, right? But we have been painting ourselves into that portrait ever since. And that is what America is about. America is more than, you know, we didn't descend from kings. We descended from these ideals and these ideas of a more perfect union. And how do we constantly move towards that? And America remembers these ideals because we fight for them. People go and die for them. And I think that it is this legacy of who we are and how every time we've come out of darkness, we've done something better and we've built something better. And that, you know, we are doing specific things like writing letters. You know, we managed, I think, to restore some funding because of letters and outrage that the Democratic Women's Caucus wrote. We hope everybody will follow us so they will see this work. Democratic Women's Caucus wasn't as outward focusing. It used to be more policy. As we are in a different moment, we have to be, I call it guerrilla storytelling. We need to be out. So please follow us so you can help us do this. But when we go out and tell people what we're doing, I think it really helps us. And we have managed to restore some funding, restore some dignity to a few areas that were cut, like the women's health research that was going on that got cut. Because we are fighting it every single time we can get. Because people need to know that it's happening. They might not have known that, you know, generals got fired just because they were women. Now that
Right.
is a problem, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you know, those, we've all done this. You know, it's a little easier now, but for those of us who managed to get where we're at now, and if you managed to get through general, you know, you had to work twice as hard, right?
Well, and when you
So
talk
don't
about
tell
people
us.
fighting
Yeah.
and dying for the country, men and women have
Right.
fought and died for the country.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, we always like to talk about a little bit of inside baseball, like what's going on that we don't see that's going on in the halls of Congress. There certainly seems to be a debate, at least out in public, at least from the Democrats who are considering running for president, about what the Democrats' message should be. Is there an active debate, pardon me, in the House right now about whether it should be populism or whether it should be more toward, the business concerns about regulation, or whether we should be focusing more on the white working class Trump voter, or whether we should really be, getting the base and bringing younger people in, to be, the way that's going to carry us over and get us those extra votes in the House. Is that an active debate about what the message for Democrats should be? And I
So
take that.
uh, I can talk about what the Democratic Women's Caucus is doing, since I'm sitting here in that role as chair. So we believe that the Democratic Women's Caucus is fighting for the economic security, the health, and the safety of all women and girls. And we believe that it is those three pillars. So it is about the affordability crisis, but it is also not just about fighting back against the fact that everything that Trump and the Republicans are doing is making life more expensive. They are not addressing the issues that voters, I think, voted on when they voted for him. There was an economic security issue, there was an affordability issue, and he has done the opposite, right? He has betrayed, that's the word I use, is betrayed the voters by failing to address the Trump tariffs, all of that. But there's also a need, and we talk about that. We are also demanding a better future. So the Democratic Women's Caucus policy piece is defending women, demanding a better future. It needs to be about the kinds of things we want to do. And by having a better future on the economics, it is paid and family leave. It is the child tax credit. It is entrepreneurial. It is not one or the other. It is what makes up that life that is a better future. On healthcare, which is our second pillar, it's not just reproductive health. It is health.
Yeah.
How do we access it or not, right? And how are we healthier? And then we are no longer safe under the Trumpian world. We are being attacked. Women are being attacked. Our rights are being attacked. They're trying to take the SAVE Act. For those of you who, I think if people following here knew the SAVE Act, they were trying.
Oh, go ahead and explain
ability to
how that
vote.
affects women. Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
And so,
explain that to
yeah.
our audience, how it
You want
affects
me to?
women.
I'm sorry, what?
Explain how the SAVE Act affects.
Okay, so the SAVE Act was Trump has tried to do it in executive order, and he was the court said you're not allowed to do election law, only Congress can do that. And what they did was they always use immigrants as the excuse for something. And remember, tyrants always choose somebody to blame so that they can gain power. Hitler did it, Mussolini did it, it happened back in ancient Greece, right? Tyrants always choose somebody to blame so that they can gain power. Right now, they're choosing immigrants. And they're saying that immigrants are undocumented are voting, which they are not. But using that as an excuse, they passed a law called the SAVE Act, which is basically a restriction on voting rights. So it's going to make it harder for certain people to vote, for poor people to vote, for people in the military to vote, and for women to vote, because you're going to have to prove citizenship when you register to vote. And if your name does not match your birth certificate, you better have a passport. Guess who doesn't have passports? Women who are not wealthy, right? 50% of women do not have passports. And a large percentage of women, interestingly, especially in Republican districts, change their name. So it's going to be very hard for them to register to vote. And we, Democratic Women's Caucus has been at the forefront of making sure that everybody understood that. We've had lots of seminars, but these are the kinds of things that they do. So that goes to the SAVE Act, which was a tangent. I'm a tangent woman, so get me back online. But there is a message. We are working right now on the immediate bills that we need to work on. And as you know, the House always does coalesce around a message. The Democrats, so that we can win in 2026. And it is going to be both about what our vision is for the future and what they are doing, similar to what the Women's Caucus message is, which is how we're defending women from what they're doing and how we're going to have our vision for a more prosperous future.
So we're about to wrap up our part of the conversation, but I want to remind everybody, because I don't actually think I did this at the beginning, but it's in the chat, to put your questions in the Q&A. If you have questions, we've already got a bunch of questions and they're very good questions.
Linda, if I could just add just a couple things to
Yeah.
the message question on the insider baseball. Teresa did a great job talking about the message, but one of the things I've raised quite a bit since the last election, even before, it's the messengers we need to be thinking about too. The right messengers that will really be able to get to the heart of American people. You know, we had a lot of superstars, a lot of celebrities, a lot of high names. We were joyful, and that's great. But if America's not feeling so joyful, they'll feel disconnected. They'll feel aggrieved. They'll feel disrespected. They're going to vote the other way. We need to actually think about the messengers that will get to both the Gen Zers, the working mothers, the senior citizens that still have to work because Social Security is not enough. Those are everyday faces, many that are already sitting in Congress that may not be in leadership, may not be ranking members, may not be high profile, viral people. But it's about the everyday messengers that are Democrats that are saying, I am here fighting for every American out there to have a shot and a chance. That is so important to me. That's what I see when I go out in my communities. They feel a disconnect to who we are, even though we know we're fighting. We know we're fighting for them. We need to actually earn back their trust that we actually are the ones who will be the tip of the spear to help make sure that their voices, their needs are met in Congress. And that as much is about the messengers that we send out there as it is the message.
Well, you two are both great messengers. I'm going to ask you one final thing, which we always like to do, and then we want to turn it over to the questions. We always like to have a call to action. So this is a very active group. It's a mighty band of volunteers who really are very, very effective in their local communities. What would you say is the call to action now as we try to take back our country, try to defend women, and try to restore some sense of equity and fairness in the country? Because right now there's a lot of panic, obviously. And I'll start with you, Congresswoman Fernandez. Just quickly, a call to action.
Okay, the call to action, one is sign up and join the Democratic Women's Caucus. We're doing a lot of work and we need you to help us amplify it. We need you to be following our members on social media. Get the information we are sending out and do the First Amendment. Make sure you use the freedom of speech. Get it out there. Be talking about it. Make sure you celebrate the freedom of the press. Get letters to the editor. Write in. Follow stuff. Freedom of assembly. Show up at those marches. They say it's about between 2 to 3% of how you end up taking back your country. And we are going to be in the streets, and we are going to be with you in the streets. Freedom of petition. Write your Congress people. And you know what? Freedom of religion. If you need to pray first thing of the morning, we need to pray at the end of the day for all of the hard work we're doing, get that done too. But we have our frontliners that we are working to protect in Congress, and we have those vulnerable Republicans. We need to go after all of them, and we are doing it. Join us in that effort. And it makes a difference. There was that viral moment with me and the tanning beds. You're gonna give tax breaks to the tanning beds, but then kick people out of their hospital beds. They were so shamed by that because it had, my kids were happy because I became a meme apparently. They took that out of the bill. Yeah. Right. When we blow things up,
right,
it makes a difference. So blow things up on social media. They're flooding the zones. We're going to flood the bones.
Okay, and it's good that you added social media to that, because you never know what somebody you're not really thinking about blowing things up.
That's why we need you to follow us. We need you to follow us on Blue Sky, on Twitter, on YouTube, on all of that, and all of your other Congress people that are out there doing this, or other people that are doing it, because we need to share it. And you never know when a tia or tío, an auntie, a cousin says, "Oh, I didn't really know that because I've been listening to Fox. I didn't know that."
Well,
right?
I'm going to let Congresswoman Tokuda work her call to action into her answer to some questions from our audience, because we've got a lot of questions. And here's one that I think is very interesting. Media outlets like Fox have so many more viewers than other outlets. How do you get the Fox audience, for example? What advice do you have for how Women Forward and our members can help through that, very, very powerful machine of information that comes from that side of the ideological divide? Let's go with you,
That's a
Dr.
great
Congresswoman
question.
Tokuda. Yeah.
Let me answer the call to action. 3 things. 1, make it personal and don't be shy about sharing. I think the more that we can put a human face, a human story to the inhumane actions that these people are doing, we have to make it clear to them that there's name, faces, real stories, real consequences, real sacrifices behind the kind of cuts and bills that they're passing. They have to know it. They have to see you. They have to hear you. They need to feel the pain that you're feeling. That is so important. Make it personal. Don't be shy. Make sure that they know how they're hurting you and your family. Make your loved ones do the same. The second thing is, please let us amplify organic celebrations of democracy. I think the fact someone told me, oh, the protest is so small. There was only 30 of us or 40 of us or 100 of us. I said, I don't care if there's 10 of you or 2 of you. Two's a gathering, right? This is what we must constantly lean into, that we have power and strength in each other and our numbers. And the most organic celebrations of this is a reminder to them that they cannot hide and we are not backing down. So continue to have those spontaneous celebrations of democracy that we absolutely need right now. And the third thing I would say is give yourself space to grieve and to heal. This is a slog. This is a battle. They're literally coming at who we are personally. I've talked to so many women where I have to remind them to give each other and yourself the time and the opportunity to heal and to grieve for what is a loss of our rights, our dignity, our respect, and everything we have fought for. Everything. That is so important. So please make it personal, share it, have these organic celebrations of democracy, and give each other and ourselves the chance to heal and to grieve for what they are doing to us, because we have to make space for ourselves at the same time. How do we
So,
battle media outlets like Fox? How do we battle the right-wing conservative machine? Well, first of all, and while I don't get invited that often, if Fox calls, answer. We
yeah.
know they're going to be slanted. We know that it's a setup in so many ways in their own brain. We can't back down. We need to actually assume the role of being the one to push back, fight back, yell back. That is what we actually have to do. We have to, yes, amplify our own social, our own outlets, but we cannot back down from opportunities to engage one-on-one. As Teresa said, she's literally going into the lion's den and going into their districts and holding town halls. The same must be said for the media. And so I think that is something that we must be looking at doing too.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, and if
that's
any of you know anybody, we will go. Just let us know. We have
that's
96
a very,
that
very
will
wise
show up.
strategy. It works for Pete Buttigieg for sure. And so I just have a couple more for you. I've got several versions of this question that Democrats are frustrated that they don't think that Democrats are doing enough, saying enough, breaking through. Like, what is necessary for all of this great stuff that you have been saying to us today, which honestly, I wish we heard more loudly and more often. It's difficult with the press figuring out how to break through. But how do you think the Democrats can overcome this perception that they're not fighting and that they're not, and break through with all the things that you're saying, which are very, very effective? Congresswoman Fernandez?
So I think that what's important is to actually do what we just said, right? When you are engaged in these many activities we talked about, from the organic democratic activities that you do to working nonstop over 2 nights and having all of that go viral and all of that head out, just keep up the work. And when you are actively engaged, not in complaining about it, but in changing the narrative, right? Because when you see all the work that actually is going on, then you do feel more energized. Because remember, tyrants always want you to feel powerless. They want you to feel despair and that you have no power. And they want you to hide and be afraid. And so we must do the opposite. We must feel our power. We must act on it. We must practice hopefulness. And we must be engaged and recognize that, you know, the people do have the power. As Dolores Huerta, I'm not going to go with Cory Booker, although I love Cory Booker, but I'm staying with the women focus. Dolores Huerta, who has the power? We have the power. What kind of power? People power. Like Dolores Huerta. We know that. And so just get involved and be doing stuff. Sometimes we sit around and we worry too much, right? Let's stop doing that and let's start getting very active and very involved, because Democrats are doing a lot. And those town halls that we're doing, they are making a difference.
So both of you have such optimism, and it's very infectious. It's infectious, I think, for this group. But one of the questions we got tonight, and I'd like to hear the answer from both of you, is what gives you hope and strength? And Congresswoman Tokuda, I'll start with you.
What gives me hope and strength?
Yeah.
You know, I think honestly, and I'm not just saying this because we're talking about women, I think it is in the sisterhood that we have, that we're able to lean on each other, that we are able to talk about the rough town halls that we have, you know, the difficult situations we find ourselves, the questioning from our constituents if we are doing enough, the fact that we have a sisterhood to be able to rely on for the best advice on what we should be doing, and the comfort when we are just struggling to be able to convey our message to our people, that gives me hope. That gives me real hope. And the fact that when I go to my town halls, I see young people there. They're questioning, but they're not just questioning, they're asking, and then what can I do? And they're not just asking anymore. As I said, with the spontaneous, organic, you know, acts of democracy, people are just doing things. They're getting out there and they're doing stuff, everything they possibly can to be able to voice both their opposition, but also the fact that we have a choice. We have a choice to vote on these idiotic bills. Democrats and Republicans. We have a choice to propose a better plan. Do we all want to cut fraud, waste, abuse? Absolutely, but not on the backs of working Americans, women, children, people struggling right now, our seniors, our veterans. That's a choice. That's a choice. And what we're offering is another choice. So I find my inspiration and joy in the sisterhood that we have, but also the fact that right now we are seeing everyday Americans recognize that it's not about waiting for Congress or any member of Congress to save them. It's about all of us saving this country collectively. And that's the joy that I feel.
Well, that's very hopeful. So Congresswoman Fernandez, we've got a minute left. We've got a pretty hard stop. Just give us your hope and your strength.
So it's at home, right? I represent, as I pointed out, a very large rural district. It was a frontliner district, and it is a place when I go out to visit it, when I'll travel 4 hours to get to some of my towns, and sit with people and have conversations with those who are affected, and understand that they are affected and understand the political moment and might be willing to vote Democrat. But what's actually almost even more hopeful is when I sit with Republicans who don't want to like me and don't want to listen to me, but will. And then afterwards we'll say, you looked me in the eye and you showed up.
Yeah.
And I think that we know now we need to look people in the eye and we need to show up. And when we show up, we overperform, because what gives me hope is our values. And Democrats' values align with a future of prosperity for Americans and a decision that we must protect all that we love. And we love our democracy, and we love our communities, and we love, you know, our planet, and we love these different things that we are willing to continue to fight for, and that we have a history of doing so, from the civil rights to the New Deal, to, you know, just start going back about what Democrats have accomplished over the centuries and what democracy has accomplished over the centuries. And it is those values that for some comes, for me, it comes from a place of faith, but a very interesting faith, because I'm from New Mexico, right? So it's indigenous and Catholic and, you know, Jewish and all kinds of stuff, but it comes from a place of faith, and what faith tells us we should do with our fellow humans, and what democracy tells us we should do.
Well, I love your I love your line that our values give us hope. I mean, that really is a wonderful way to summarize this great, great conversation that we've had with the two of you, and you both give us hope. Be sure and share this, audience. Be sure and share this on all your social channels. Tell your friends to watch, tell your friends to be active, and this will be on our Facebook page. So be sure to tell everybody to watch this absolutely fascinating conversation with these two great women. We're so grateful for your time, for your insights, for your hard work, your brains, and your heart. And with that, we will say goodbye, and we'll see you the next time. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Jill.